Greetings, mortals. Welcome to Fatal Fortunes. I'm Al,
I'm Will. Join us for a deep dive into some of history's most fascinating characters who live dangerously beautiful lives.
and whose legacies haunt us today.
Hey everyone, welcome to Fatal Fortunes. I'm Will.
I'm Al. Thank you so much for tuning into our first episode.
Woo, so excited. This has been a few weeks in the making, I would say, but we're so excited. Well, yeah, no, it's been a few weeks. We've
I'm
really,
like, is it a month?
we
Is it a
had
month?
that, or maybe it was a month. I don't know. We had the idea and we really just ran with it. We just kept on working on it, and we're so excited to finally be here and deliver this amazing episode. A little bit of background on both of us so you get to know us. I'm Will. I live in California. I went to school with Al at Emerson in Boston. And now I live in LA and I work in documentaries. Um, and I love to write. I love to hang out with my dog. Um, but yeah, I really love diving into kind of the interesting, fascinating characters of history who had these really beautiful lives, and they were beautiful people, and some of them had some tragic endings. And I just feel like in this podcast we're really going to dive into the people that deserved more of a story to be told, and we're going to really tell those stories. So really excited to be a co-host.
Me too. I'm Al. I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. And like Will said, we both went to Emerson College together, where we met on a film set. We had actually encountered each other a little bit before then. So in 2017, I was studying abroad in the Netherlands. Will was studying abroad in London. Will ended up coming to the castle that our study abroad program was at. And I remember looking at Will at the bar, like around like Halloween time, like, who is this? Who,
Yeah, because I was
like,
just like the random like person that wasn't part of the program there, and people were like, "Oh, is he from Emerson? You look kind of familiar." Like, because I had some friends there, but yeah,
exactly. And it was American night. So no one else came on American night. So I was like, you must be one of us.
yeah, it's really
But we
fascinating.
weren't formally introduced until we did
Right?
a film together. Shout out Alfonso, shout out Angel Perez.
Yes.
We worked on a film called That Summer Boy together. And yeah, we were on the set. And I finally went up to Will and said, I know I gave you a dirty look last fall. And I need to rectify that because you're a really nice person. I'm so sorry. And then we just bonded over coffee. We bonded over smoking weed behind a dumpster at a Holiday Inn. Yeah.
Yeah, and drinking and complaining about the very it was really hot on that set, wasn't it? Like really
So
hot.
hot.
And there was so much physical labor, like bringing up equipment, because basically this film is like a love drama story, and it takes place no other place than on top of a hill, like basically a mini mountain in Vermont in the woods. And I actually remember I saw a bear one time at night, but like it
Oh
was
my
it was a
God.
really it was like you're in the thick of it. You're really in the woods. So it was a really great bonding experience. I really, became good friends with Al. I feel like just from that, like I feel like we had this like connection. And I remember we were like cooking lunch, and we were like cooking to like Princess Nokia, like cook,
Yeah.
cook. I like to cook. I remember that.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, we're so excited to talk about these really fascinating characters on Fatal Fortunes. We kind of just had like kind of an Instagram DM text chain where we're sharing Instagram posts about Princess Diana and like other like historical figures that are kind of
And not even just
interesting.
historical figures plus conspiracy theories surrounding them. Like, do you
True.
believe this story about them? Like, getting
Yeah.
very deep into the minutia. And I was always really appreciating everything Will said. I woke up in the morning like, oh my God, my historical level. This is amazing. And we're Emerson College students. Of course, we said we're having fun. We need to now make it into media.
And also, I think something that we talked about when we're developing this podcast is that we don't want to just do like the basic people that I feel like a lot of people know their, fatal, beautiful, tragic stories. Like, we definitely are open to doing them in the future. People like, Kurt Cobain, Marilyn Monroe, Amy Winehouse. We just feel like there's been so much done about them that we want to deliver people that we think that are really interesting. And, maybe you don't know them. Maybe you don't recognize them by their image at first glance, but these are people that really have fascinating, unbelievable stories, and they're human. And there's glamour, there's sex, there's drama, death, violence,
Everything.
everything. Yeah.
Something that we both really want to do to frame our characters is to drop them into history. So Princess Margaret, the person we're covering today, she was born in 1930. And in 1930, a whole bunch of stuff happened. It basically sounds like a 2020 when you run through just a little bit of it. So Mickey Mouse, Looney Tunes, Betty Boop, those all debut this year. The existence of Pluto is confirmed. Gandhi begins his 200-mile march. The Danish girl Lily Ebb begins her sex reassignment surgery. Frozen food goes on sale for the first time right in my backyard of Springfield, Massachusetts, which I think is very cool. And the Hays Code takes effect, which I know is the persona non grata of every film student. The Nazis are elected to enough seats in the Reichstag to become the second largest party in the Weimar Republic, foreshadowing. The beloved Haile Selassie becomes Emperor of Ethiopia. Penicillin is first used as a cure in this year. And there's a birth of a little baby girl named Margaret Rose.
Yeah, so we are going to dive into the life of Princess Margaret.
In the exact way that she would, drinking.
Yes, cheers. Yes.
Cheers. I am drinking rosé tonight out of my Van Gogh mug.
I'm drinking wine. Red wine. I don't really know what kind. It's fair trade and organic, so it must be good. And it's from South Africa, which is interesting. It's called Stellar Organics. Not sponsored, but just thought I'd share
that.
this.
That sounds good. I'm sorry. The wine I'm drinking is the Tasty's Internet Favorite Award because I'm not cultured.
What is it? What's the brand called?
Tasty, like Tasty,
Tasties?
the recipe people.
Oh, I didn't know they had a wine. Okay, well, we'll definitely have to let them know that we love their wine.
Absolutely. It's their. Margaret was born in Scotland. She's the first royal to be born in Scotland since 1887, when her cousin Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg, the future Queen of Spain, was born at Balmoral Castle. But she was the daughter of Queen Victoria's last daughter, so she was never going to be queen. That wasn't a possibility. But Margaret, when she's born, she's fourth in line to the throne. She is born at Glamis Castle, the ancestral home of her mother's side, and they are the Bowes-Lyons' family. They are a very aristocratic family, and while her mother, Elizabeth, the queen mom, who will call her that right from the beginning, she very much sees herself as Scottish. She sees herself as a Scottish heiress from a very aristocratic family, almost more pomp and circumstance than even the royal family themselves, who at this point is mostly German. But anyway, her mother is one of the last grand dames. She's a lady. She's enjoying the roaring 20s. They're going crazy. After the First World War, she is letting loose. And at this time, George V, the current king's second son, is proposing marriage to her off the chain. She spends a lot of time making this decision. She rejects him a whole bunch of times. But she figures Bertie's never going to be king. He's got a stammer. He has no training. However, his brother, the Prince of Wales, huge playboy, huge celebrity.
Yep.
Everyone loves him. And it's only 1920, like 23 at this time. There's still time for him to get married. He's a bachelor, but there's time for him to get married, time for him to have children. And by the next thing she knows, her husband's going to be so far down the line of succession, it doesn't even matter. However, by the 1930s, the Yorks have a daughter, Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth II. The Prince of Wales is still unmarried. The Queen Mom is pregnant again. If this child had been a boy, it would have superseded that girl Elizabeth in the line of succession. And what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of interesting because, you know, in I don't know if it was necessarily this way in their family, but in other families, she would be like the disappointment child, that like she's not a boy. And um but I think that Bertie or George and the Queen Mom, they had a good head on their shoulders, and they knew that like the future heir being a king wasn't necessarily imperative, especially because there's such a history of strong, powerful uh, women who were leading England and the United Kingdom as queen. So, yeah, I feel like they were kind of, progressive in that way just because there is kind of this proven history of strong female leaders.
And even when you think about it, in 1922, they're already calling the Victorian era the Victorian era. It just ended 20 years ago, but they're still calling it that. So it's not like having a female ruler is going to be super radical. And the king even says in an anecdote that he sees so much of Queen Victoria in her. So he's like, why am I going to have a third child who, if it's a girl, isn't going to have any role? And if it's a dude, is going to supersede our daughter who's already 6 and is like aware and present of the fact that she's 3 heartbeats away from the throne.
So before King George became king and before Elizabeth was the queen to be the heir apparent, um, Elizabeth and Margaret's uncle, Uncle Edward, he was king at the time. He was, known as the Prince of Wales or King Edward VIII, and he abdicated because his lover, Wallis Simpson, was a divorcee, and the church and the government and the United Kingdom have a really big problem with divorce, especially for the Queen and the King. And you'll see that play out throughout British history, really, and even in some of our episodes on Fatal Fortunes. Yeah, so when he abdicated from the throne to be with the woman that he loved, Wallis Simpson, that made King George, well, that made George, the brother, the new king. And as Al said, King George, Bertie, he had a speech impediment. He was a little awkward. He wasn't the best speaker. He was a heavy smoker. But he took on the role and he took it on with stride. And that basically ups his children's place to the throne. And Elizabeth is now the heir apparent. She's the firstborn. She's going to be queen whenever he dies. And that means Margaret is kind of, the second fiddle. And legend has it, I'm not sure if this actually happened, but Margaret is rumored to have said, "Poor you," to Elizabeth when Edward abdicated and she became the heir apparent, which I don't really know if that's true. What do you think?
I don't know. It's the banter of a 4-year-old. A 4-year-old could definitely look at you
Yeah.
and be like, "Oh, you have a
Poor...
job already? You're 10 and you have a job already?" And say poor you, but I also think, not to base anything off the Crown necessarily, but there's that scene in the Crown where like they go to the government minister or the guy from the church and say like, we'd like to switch places, please.
Yeah.
So I definitely know, I don't know, I know Margaret wanted, from that scene and from how it's described to her as a child, that she would readily supplant her sister.
Right.
However, I could also see her saying poor you, because at the back of the mind she knows she can never actually overtake Elizabeth because she loves her. She doesn't want to wish anything ill on her.
Right. Yeah. And, Elizabeth, from an objective point of view, I feel like she's been a pretty great leader. And, I don't want to say if Margaret wouldn't have been a great queen, because maybe she would have. Maybe, her kind of wild side that you'll see us talking about later, maybe that stems from her not being queen. There's so many different factors. Margaret is such
Yeah.
a complex character. And one of the most maybe crucial parts of her childhood, in addition to her sister becoming queen, was living as a child in World War II and being the princess with the royal family, her family, and being under the fear that they're going to be bombed, that they're going to be attacked or kidnapped or whatever, because they were public enemy number one, perhaps. Like they were a big target. I mean, they, they're kind of the heads of this nation. And thank God they had their really heavy duty castles block them from everything, because if they had it, who knows? But I think it must have been really stressful for them at that time um during World War II.
Of course, of course. And I even think about how Buckingham Palace got bombed during the Blitz. So Margaret and her sister, they were targets. The royal family was targets. You go from being a girl who's being raised to be wife of Duke of whatever or wife of Prince of whatever to suddenly being the first family of the United Kingdom. To suddenly you don't have that life anymore because anyone you try and marry, it's going to be a bunch of scrutiny, bunch of press, bunch of criticism, especially. And that's hard on a young girl.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly how it was on them. I wasn't there in the room, but I do think that their parents were supportive and gave them courage and stuff. And I actually remember that there's a radio broadcast of Elizabeth and Margaret it's like called the children's broadcast. It's like right at the beginning of the war, and at the very end she says, come on, Margaret. And then Margaret's like, good night, children.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, so they were kind of sort of brought up and trained from an early age to be diplomatic and to be kind of leading figures. So and when you think about all those children that were listening to that broadcast, they were looking up to Margaret from a young age, which is why perhaps maybe when Margaret made some more questionable decisions down the line, why everyone was so up in arms about it.
And then I also think the other side of that is people are like, she's just like us. Oh, Margaret and Elizabeth, they can't be with their families right now, too. They're just like us. Or Margaret wants to marry hot RAF pilot. She's just like us. So I feel like there's also that sympathy that the people, in the same way that they felt so attached to Diana, are definitely feeling attached to Margaret. Queen Elizabeth, she belongs to the country, but Margaret can belong to the people, is how they see it, especially during her childhood.
Yeah, that's a super, super good point. So to close off this World War II chapter, they, when Margaret's a young teen, her and Elizabeth sneak out on V-Day, the celebration of the end of World War II, and they're, with the common people, and they have that exhilarating thrill moment, and it's a really, fun teen thing. And there's a movie about it that Al has seen.
Yeah, Royal Night Out. I watched it with my mom.
Which you should check out if you haven't. I've seen like a bit. I think I've seen the trailer, and I think it'd be it's like a fun, like drink or whatever.
Yeah, it's a fun rosé and no brain cells night.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So after World War II, things kind of start to spice up for Margaret. I mean, she's 16, it's 1947, and she goes to a tour of the Commonwealth to South Africa with her parents and her sister, and Group Captain Peter Townsend is the chaperone.
Basically, Peter Townsend, he's a Battle of Britain hero, Air Force pilot, and basically what they're doing at this time is they're appointing these war heroes to be equerries of the king for 3-month periods, is like a thank you so much for your service and for not dying, stuff like that. But this guy ends up staying for like 5 years. And one of the reasons why they're going on this trip around the Commonwealth, not only is the war over, they're going to go see the Commonwealth to thank the people, but apartheid in South Africa is ramping up. And they see this as a threat to the Commonwealth, a threat to the empire. And George says, the people love me. I just won this war. No, he didn't, but I just won this war. We need to go down to South Africa and see if we can stop this. And basically, even in apartheid South Africa, when the king was trying to give a medal to a black person for service in the war, he had to pass it to someone else, who then passed it to someone else, who then passed it to the black person. He's like, this guy's just standing right in front of me. Why can't I do this? However, it's a long journey. It's only 1947. It takes a long time to get from Britain to South Africa.
Yeah, you can get really close and, talk a lot. pillow talk in those
Yeah, you can
days.
get really close. Exactly. And basically, the king says, I don't want to do all that stuffy shit. The war is finally over. I'm going someplace warm for the first time in my life, basically. Stop calling me your majesty. Just treat us like normal people. We want to have fun. We're going to be on this boat forever together.
Yeah. I think that's something I do admire about the royal family, particularly, Queen Elizabeth and her father, is that even though imperialism is the devil, it's also like I feel like, for what they were, you know, given in terms of the reins of responsibility, they did truly respect the leaders and the people of the different nations. They thought of them like a family, and and that differs between their perspective and the prime minister's perspective, because the prime ministers are more of the actual politicians. But
Yeah, like
just
even the queen, when she's on this trip in South Africa, she's actually 21 at the time. And she even says, like, the great imperial family to which we all belong. And I think it's really poignant, even in The Crown in the most recent season. I know this isn't history, but I think that this is actually true to how the queen thinks. She sees herself as a tribal leader in a fuzzy hat. So when people look at her and they're like, why would you interact with that person? Why would you interact with that person? She's like, this guy's a king. I'm a queen. I'm going to talk to them. They're a member of the Commonwealth. They are part of the imperial family. We all belong to it. So I think that's also really amazing about the queen,
yeah.
personally. Not to go on a tangent about her, but the queen plays a huge role in her sister's story. Let's be real.
True.
If the queen had been a boy, they might have stopped trying to have children and Margaret wouldn't have happened.
That is true. Yeah. And we're so thankful that didn't happen, because we love Margaret and the Queen.
Because we wouldn't be here doing this podcast today.
Yeah, exactly. So Margaret at the time, she's 16. Group Peter Townsend is 33. And he was married at that time, right?
Yes, and he had 2 children.
Oh wow.
Can you imagine being the wife of someone like a grown-ass 30-year-old woman? Like, just put yourself in her shoes. Like, oh, my husband's leaving for months?
Yeah, and then
He comes back and he doesn't love you anymore? Like,
yeah,
oh my
it's like
God.
yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit call me by your name
Yep.
age. Well, actually the age gap is a little bit bigger,
Mhm.
um Townsend, Peter Townsend, he is really good looking. He is.
I think
He's
so.
very like dashing, and he's I feel like he's charismatic, but the not like outwardly like JFK charismatic. Like he's more internal, he's more refined, he's carefully chosen words, and
He's more get a gin and tonic him and it'll loosen up.
right, yeah, and he values conversation, and I yeah, I think he's super cool and charismatic, and he's really handsome, way better looking than the one in The Crown. I'm sorry, whoever
Oh,
played him.
absolutely.
I thought that they did a disservice to Peter.
Such a disservice because if the actor in The Crown, what did you say his name was again?
I don't know. I don't know his name.
Whatever his name is. I'm not giving up my place in the line of succession for that dude. I'm giving it up for
No.
actual Peter Townsend is what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
yeah. Like no, like he was a fine actor, but he wasn't like the best actor even, I think, for the role. So yeah, that's our thoughts on the Peter Townsend casting. I think Vanessa Kirby, who plays Margaret, did a great job though. She did. She's really good.
Yeah.
So anyways, so they get closer as, they kind of go on these tours, they go on these royal engagements, and Townsend is kind of always kind of their bodyguard, and Margaret, starts to develop a infatuation with him,
And
and
it's not like Peter Townsend is the only person around the king. He's got a private secretary. He's got another equerry. He's got a
right,
whole bunch of people on his team. So it's easy for Margaret, the only other princess of the United Kingdom, to say, "Hey, I need him. Get him over here." I would
Yeah.
like to flirt with him.
So on another tour to Belfast, which was also in 1947, Townsend and Margaret actually sleep in a bedroom. Or no, they don't sleep in the same bedroom. They sleep in bedrooms adjacent to each other. So,
Still scandal.
yeah, they're
Escándalo.
close. They're getting close. Margaret becomes 18 and she really becomes the it girl. Because I feel like the queen, Princess Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth II, I feel like she was kind of missing that it girl factor that Margaret had. And Margaret really became kind of like a movie star, photographed with these really iconic sunglasses, which we'll insert a photo on our YouTube page, our YouTube video. And she would smoke cigarettes at the theater, and she was just really badass.
Another thing is that the difference between Elizabeth and Margaret when Margaret turns 18 is Elizabeth's beautiful and everything. She's still young, she's amazing, but she's off the market. So they're not interested. They already know that she's gotten her fairy tale happy ending with Prince Philip. So I think that's even more why they're attracted to Margaret. She's got these beautiful brown hair. She's got an 18-inch waist, which I know is impossible in today with our food filled with antibiotics. And she's got these huge blue eyes. She's like short in stature, but everyone's obsessed with her. Like a movie star will stop everything they're doing to wait in line to talk to Margaret.
Right.
And while she's linking up with Townsend, falling in love with Townsend, the press is speculating like crazy on who she's going to marry. Every guy they see light her cigarette, they're like, he's it. The Marquis of Blah is it. The Baron of is it. And at this time, there's some speculation, which I don't know if this is true. However, there is speculation that the American ambassador to Britain's daughter, Charmaine Douglas, who she was constantly seen with, was actually one of her first lovers, and that the palace turned a blind eye to it because they were like, oh, perfect. She's growing sexually, becoming an adult, but she's not going to get pregnant. So great. She can be bosom buddies with Charmaine Douglas because they never see that as her future. There's a ITV documentary about it if you want to see it, or maybe it's Channel 4, but there's a British documentary that goes all into this if you ever want
Interesting.
to dive. It's on YouTube.
I was gonna say, I was watching The Crown recently, just some of the Margaret episodes, just to refresh my memory, and there was that moment, which is, I believe, to actually be true, is that the thing that kind of ticked off the press was that Margaret removed like a little piece of fluff from Townsend's jacket,
How
and
crazy is
you
that?
can, I think you can see the photo too.
Yeah, it's at the
Um,
coronation of her sister.
yeah, yeah. So that's a very telling thing, because if you do that, it's like if someone like fixes your collar, or you know puts their hand in your hair, or like something that's like
Yeah.
making touching you up. Even if you don't have a crush on that person, it does feel a little bit invasive, and a little bit invasive, or a little bit, it's a little close, like it's like you're comfortable with that person. So that was definitely a
Imagine if it was a
telltale
bug.
sign.
Imagine if it wasn't Lynn, if it was a bug. Like she's
Is a bug.
she's saving the day. Like
Or like bird poop or something.
this is not romantic. There's a huge bug on you, dude. I have to get in your spaces to not cause panic on live TV.
So King George the Sixth, obviously, he died due to lung disease from smoking too much. I think was a big factor. And Queen Elizabeth, she ascends to the throne, and Margaret is just destroyed over losing her father, as is Elizabeth. But Elizabeth, she can't really allow herself to grieve, because she has to carry out the duties of being queen. She has to, go for it. Like it's all or nothing, baby. You just gotta go, go, go. And for Margaret, I mean, she could kind of grieve a little bit more. And I think that's a factor that led to her relationship with Townsend being so intense and strong and loving, is because he was really there for her when she was grieving the loss of her father. And you know he could technically be her father. Daddy issues are a real thing. Freud wasn't super wrong. So yeah, I think that's definitely a factor that plays into it.
Yeah, I never even thought of that either. Like imagine all the times that the king wasn't there, but Townsend was there and was the one that could guide her,
Hmm.
help her. It's not like he could like help her do the geometry homework or anything, but I can't imagine George was the most present parent. Say she's in London, he's in Kensington, like they're at Buckingham, like they were probably not always together. So I can totally see her daddy issues thing.
Yeah. And I think something that people need to understand who aren't familiar with the British monarchy is that I feel like a lot of, I mean, not all, but I feel like a lot of the relationships that lead to proposals that might lead to marriage, they kind of happen like at light speed. Like once like someone like
Yeah.
finds someone, they're like, okay, that's them. You know, with Elizabeth, Philip was like kind of like the first like guy that was like kind of like courting her. She was only like 12,
Yeah.
he was like 17 or something. And like, you know, that was the first guy she met really. And boom, they're together. And for Townsend and Margaret, I mean, I do think for them it was a little bit different in that they had this relationship prior to King George's death, but I think after George's death, it was kind of exhilarated and or accelerated. And pretty soon in 1953, Townsend proposes and Margaret accepts, and she tells her sister, Queen Elizabeth II, you know, she's so excited, and you know, she loves Townsend. And the Queen, you know, she at first she's said to, you know, be accepting of it. Soon she finds out that it's not as accepted by Parliament and the church and the overall monarchy.
But anyway, the king is dead. So the queen mom has to get her ass out of Buckingham Palace. And she's dragging her feet. Prince Philip is like, "You made me leave the house that I just redid for myself to live here at Buckingham Palace, and now my mother in law won't leave." So she finally leaves for Clarence House. Margaret goes with her because she's unmarried, even though she's a grown up. And in the crown, it says that Peter is the comptroller of the queen mother. But then in other sources I found, it said that he was the equerry of the queen as well. What are your take? What's your take? What do you think?
I'm not really sure about the minutia of it all, but yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Because I feel like it makes more sense for their relationship to blossom and mature if he's working for the queen mom than it is if he's working at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would make sense for his role to be kind of deferred to the queen mom after the father died, right? Is that
Yeah. And remember,
yeah.
guys, this was crazy for everyone. This is already 1953, basically. And he's been working there since 1946, 47. He was only supposed to be there for 3 months in the first place. So everyone's really confused about why a Battle of Britain hero who could have a really high ranking place in the army is working for an old lady as like her scheduler.
Right. As Margaret and Peter Townsend are trying to make this engagement turn to an eventual marriage, Parliament is not so happy, and the Prime Minister at the time was no other than Winston Churchill. And, you know, he goes to the Queen and says Parliament will not consent to a marriage which is not sanctioned by the Church of England. And the Church of England, you know, divorce is just not very it's not a fun thing with the Church of England.
It's
it
not cool.
it's not cool. It's not fetch, you know. And the only option for Margaret is to leave the family, to leave her royal, you know, her royal perks, her inheritance, her, you know, her duties, her tiaras. I'm assuming, you know, she basically has to excommunicate herself from the family, kind of like Megxit a little bit. Not
Kind of like Megxit, kind of like Wallace Simpson and Edward the Eighth.
Yeah, kind of like Diana when she exited the royal family.
Fergie, all of them.
Yeah, when you exit the royal family, you don't get as many of those benefits at all, and you
It's a
don't get.
hard exit.
Yeah, it's a hard exit because you know, yeah, it's not very. It's kind of cut and dry. It's not a smooth, romantic. You know, oh, I'm going on vacation. Exit. It's it's like a
And to be honest, joining the royal family sounds like shards of glass. Being in the royal family sounds like shards of glass. Leaving sounds like shards of glass. Like it doesn't
yeah.
sound fun.
Yeah, and you know, Margaret, like this is her family. Like, why would she want to leave her family and give it up for that? And I think she's frustrated, and you know, she is frustrated, and she tries to make it work, but eventually she finds out that it won't work. It's like she can't give it up.
And in the ways that Margaret wasn't educated in physics or astronomy, she was educated in duty. Her whole
Right.
life, her parents have looked at her and said, your job is to support your sister. So being 22, the age that like I am right now, like thinking about like, oh my God, do I leave? Do I stay? Do I leave? Do I go? Must have been crazy for her because her whole life is wound around
Yeah.
being in this family.
Yeah.
I also want to recall that Margaret, she's fourth in line to the throne at this point when Townsend proposes in 1953. She's fourth in line because Elizabeth has already had Charles and Anne. So and 16 years ago was the abdication crisis. This is recent memory. Like, even Churchill himself is like, I don't see a reason why she can't marry this hot guy.
Mm.
I would too. Come on. But his wife, Clem, she reminds him like, dude, this wasn't cool with the establishment. Whereas the people, 97% of them say she should be able to marry who she likes. There's no reason that a princess of the United Kingdom should have less freedom than the common man that watches and waves at her. As Will had mentioned earlier, when Margaret pulls that little tuft of stuff off of his little shoulder pad, it's June 14th of 1953. On June 30th that same year, Margaret and the Queen Mum leave for Zimbabwe, at the time called Rhodesia. Right here is the worst thing I think the Queen ever did to Margaret. So basically, she knows that Margaret's leaving on this diplomatic mission. She says this is the perfect time to repost Peter Townsend. And for a really long time, I thought that it was advisors, but it seems like the Queen was pretty in on this too. And she had gone to her sister and said, no one's gonna send him away without letting you say goodbye. No one's gonna say that. Feel free to go to Zimbabwe. It's gonna be fine. Of course, she's in the back door, like, send him to Belgium. And basically, the Queen Mom, they're in this lovely retreat in Zimbabwe, and she goes into her room and she says, Peter's not gonna be there when you get back. Oof. And Margaret loses her damn mind. She says, I got the flu. I ain't leaving my room. I'm drinking all day. I hate all of you. So then for the rest of the trip, it's probably like day 4 of their 2-week-long trip, and she's not coming out.
Wow.
What do you think? Do you think that this is the worst thing that the Queen ever did to her, or do you think that the Queen's done worse to her?
I mean, I think it kind of is. I mean, I don't put the entire blame on the Queen just because, this was, pretty, it was pretty soon after the Queen's coronation, and it's not like
days.
Just it's not the Queen. It's not like the Queen wanted to go up against that establishment that she just got inducted into as the leader. So I think it's understandable that she didn't, give Margaret the okay. But at the same time, it is hard. And if she really wanted Margaret to marry Townsend, I think it could have happened. She's the Queen. She can make it happen. But she was so young and but I do think that the royal family, I mean, sometimes, if they really want to put their foot down to someone who might be a little bit rebellious or something, they kind of just slam the brakes and they're like, out, stop,
Yeah. Megxit.
Yeah, it's a pretty like brutal like severing of ties, and that's kind of what they did. They sent Townsend away, right? Didn't they send him to like, where did they send him to? Belgium?
He's like the foreign attaché in Belgium.
Yeah. So they sent him there. And Margaret's, just devastated. It's this guy that she thought was the love of her life, and maybe it is the love of her life. I think it might be, because they did truly love each other. But
if your love can't surmount such a big thing as like her losing her line, it shouldn't, if you love this guy, it should not matter if you can't be Queen of England anymore, because that already wasn't a reality for you.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Anyway, while Townsend's away in Belgium, they're writing to each other every day back and forth for 2 years. And the Queen feels bad. She says, I, as the person Elizabeth, want my sister to be happy. I, as the leader of the establishment, must listen to my ministers. So they come to a compromise. Basically, constitutionally, Margaret is allowed to decide who she marries when she turns 25. So she just has to wait out 2-3 years of him being gone before she can say, doesn't matter. You can take my line of succession. You can take my civil list payment. You can take it all. I don't care. I will be plain Margaret Townsend. However, the day that Townsend returns to London is absolutely insane. Imagine that everything at Sephora is free. Everyone is waiting in line, both sides of the road, just trying to see this guy leave the airport, trying to see this guy like show up down the road that even goes to Buckingham Palace. London is on fire. England is on fire. Everyone is basically bursting about what this decision that Margaret's going to make. She thinks she's going to lose the 6,000 pounds, which inflated is actually a lot of money. She thinks she's going to lose that if she marries this guy. But from a documentary that I saw recently, there were letters going between members of parliament that said, okay, we're going to let her do this. We're going to remove her from the line of succession like we always knew she was going to. But she's going to stay Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret. We're going to up her civil list allowance and we're going to get a title for Townsend. But she has no idea. So she comes to her decision without
Oh.
that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she had no, if they had literally waited 2 weeks longer, totally different story.
Yeah.
Might not even be a fatal fortune anymore.
Well, I think it is still. Well, she didn't know. Well, yeah. No. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it might have not been fatal if she would have known. But I do think that her family, her sister, her mom probably did play a part in her final decision to release a statement saying that she chooses her duty over her love for Peter Townsend.
Do you want to read the statement that Margaret and Townsend wrote when they announced to the press that they weren't going to get
Okay,
married?
yeah, sure. I would like it to be known that should I do like an accent? A Princess Margaret
I'd
accent?
like it to be known.
Yes. I would like it to be known that I've decided not to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend. I have been aware, subject to my renouncing my rights of succession, it may have been possible for me to contract a civil marriage, but mindful of the Church's teachings that Christian marriage is indissoluble, and conscious of my duty to the Commonwealth, I have decided to put these considerations before any others. That was a really
I
bad
think that really
impersonation,
shows what
but
Margaret is deep down. Like maybe on the exterior, she's a fun party smoking girl, but church and duty are number one, is what at least seems in this little write up.
yeah. Or it kind of seems like she was convinced. Either it probably was a little bit of both, like her convincing herself to some degree and then other people convincing her that this is what you need to do. So
And apparently Townsend wrote the bulk of this little write up. He says in his autobiography that he wrote it, brought it to Margaret, and said, "This is exactly what I would have said anyway. Perfect."
yeah, and he also said that Queen Elizabeth was pretty supportive during this time and that he doesn't bear any resentment towards her, which I think is important to know because even though she may be the face of the monarchy and the establishment, it's not all her choice at the end of the day.
Yep. Which I think is kind of crazy. Like you think of the Henry VIIIs of the world, and you're like, Elizabeth, you should have put your foot down. Henry VIII got all those divorces. Come on. Any annulment he wanted. Let's be real. But it also just shows you how far the British monarchy's come. Like the king just can't say, okay, we're executing X, Y, and Z today. I'm divorcing da 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 today. And my mistress just have a baby. Like this isn't the world that they live in anymore.
Yeah,
If
they
the
don't
queen
live in
wants
the
to
world.
stay,
Yeah, they don't live in the world where the monarchs have all the power where they can make the rules about everything. So, yeah, it's different.
yeah, the
Um
queen doesn't want her rent checks to stop cashing on the first. Just to round out Townsend in this episode, he ends up marrying a girl who looks just like Margaret, identical, 20 years old. Meanwhile, it's not like Townsend stayed 33 this whole time. Man has aged.
he likes them young. He
He
does.
likes he likes them just out of the house.
Yeah, like Scott Disick level.
Yeah, he's the Scott Disick of his day, basically. And he marries a girl named Marie Louise Ganjme? Ganjne? I
Jamal?
have
I
some
don't know.
friends. some French friends who are definitely gonna ostracize me for that pronunciation. But he marries her in 1955. She's 20 years old. He's 45. And they end up having 3 children together. One of them, Isabel, becomes a fine ass Ralph Lauren model. Look it up. She's beautiful. And you can't find much on Marie, which I think is really sad that her whole life is tied up in the fact that she married the guy who Princess Margaret rejected. It's really sad
Right.
that you look up Marie Luce and the only thing that comes up is her engagement photo. I can't even tell if she's dead yet because
Yeah,
there's
that's
no
creepy.
obituary for her online.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot with people of the royal family who are connected, but they're not in the limelight, or they're just kind of a side piece to someone. They're kind of left in the shadows a lot of the time.
Which is sad because I know that she has dimensions. She probably has a fatal fortune herself.
Yes, yes.
Townsend goes on to write a whole bunch of books. They rewind. So the daughter Isabel that I mentioned earlier, she ends up buying a house called Les Moulins de la Tuileries, where the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Edward and Wallace, had actually lived in at one point. One of his sons from his first marriage that he had gotten divorced from so that he could possibly marry Margaret, he ends up marrying a princess of Ling and it goes badly. That's all I have to say on that. And Townsend himself spends the rest of his life writing fiction books, nonfiction books, war stories. He sells his medals to start a charity for children affected by war. He does a couple consulting roles on PBS documentaries, especially The Windsors, The Royal Family, A Royal Family, which is on PBS and you can find it on YouTube. Very good from 1994, but retains its glamour. Then he and Margaret cross paths again in 1958 before both of them get married. And he says, just and he says, just like I think a lot of people never see their old girlfriends. And brother, do I hear that one? Do I never want to see any of my old boyfriends?
Yeah,
He and
totally.
Margaret also see each other finally for the last time in 1992 when they have dinner in London. And Margaret says the evening was nothing special and that he hadn't changed, except that he'd gone gray. And she had a little bit of fondness for her first love. He died in France in 1995 of stomach cancer, and at the time of his death, Maria had outlived him, and so did the rest of his children.
Well, what an ending.
And that's the
Well,
life of a Battle of Britain hero, baby.
yep. So I guess to cap off this episode, why do you think that Margaret and her upbringing and her relationship with Townsend is kind of a fatal fortune? Like, what's so fatal about it? What's the legacy of it, I guess?
I think it's so fatal just going back to that statistic of that 97% of the English public thought that she should be able to marry this guy. I think that it's really impacted all of her future relationships. And I think that it made Margaret just such a hard person to be loved.
Hmm.
That is just fatal. Margaret died alone and unhappy. And I think that that fatal fortune of hers began with the Townsend affair.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think a big theme that you will see throughout royal history, even outside of the British monarchy, is the idea of love versus the crown. Choosing a romantic relationship, someone you really, really love, or choosing the established role as a, you know,
Princess, countess,
yeah,
queen.
exactly, duchess, king, queen, whatever, like choosing to have that as your life rather than having your love in it as well, because some people they do find love and they do find the crown, but for a lot of people they don't. They find that love in the crown, well, true love and the crown, they constantly just will butt heads and never sort of bridge together.
Yeah, not everyone can be as lucky as Queen Victoria and Prince Albert or the Prince
Elizabeth and
or
Philip.
exactly. Not everyone can be that lucky. I really like this discussion point of yours, and I wanted to know, who do you like more, Vanessa Kirby or Helena Bonham Carter as Princess Margaret?
Um, yeah, well, we will be talking more about Helena Bonham Carter in part 2 of this episode, where we dive into the later years of Margaret. But I honestly, that's such a hard question because I think they did both a really good job. I think I'm kind of partial to Vanessa Kirby, though. I think she just hits it a little bit more sharper on the delivery.
I
How about
think
you?
she's a way better personality for Margaret. I don't want to say way better. Helena Bonham Carter is a phenomenal actress. However, Vanessa Kirby's too tall. Margaret's a small person. So in the scenes where she's like
True.
having lunch with the queen and she's like kind of more imposing over her, like yes, her personality is very imposing, but like physically she was not that much bigger than
Yeah.
people. She was in fact like a lot smaller than most people.
But I don't know if she could really pull off like the later years like Helena Bonham Carter did. So, you know,
Who's
you
playing
did.
her next in season 5?
I don't know. Is that going to be her last season?
I think
Maybe, or
so.
second last. I think there's only
I
like
don't
one
know
or
if the show's going to go to 2001. And I have this weird theory that it's going to go straight Soprano style and be like, don't stop believing, cut to black the second Diana gets in that car leaving the Ritz.
Oh, no. No. Oh, I don't think it'll be like that, no. But
I'm
it could
ready for the
be.
lazy writing. So anything more than that, I'm surprised and excited.
Well, the writer of The Crown he's kind of obsessed with the royal family. He's the one who did the Queen movie with
Yeah.
Helen Mirren, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, if you haven't seen The Crown, make sure to check it out. It is a pretty good show. I mean, not every single
It's fiction.
detail. Yeah, it's fiction, but I would say it's based in truth.
Yeah. And of course, we don't know what happened behind closed doors, but I don't doubt that all the historians they have working on the show haven't figured out an accurate timeline. Let's be real.
Yeah, and sometimes they embellish or assume things, but a lot of it is pretty heavily researched, like our podcast, I guess.
Absolutely. Duh. Just to wrap up where we are, it's 1955. Margaret's 25 years old. She's got a marriage and a lung removal ahead. Trust us, it's gonna be fatal. Thank you so much for tuning into the first ever episode of Fatal Fortunes. I have been Al.
I have been Will.
On Tuesdays, we talk ghosts. See you next time.
Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Follow us on our Instagram and YouTube at Fatal Fortunes. We're also on TikTok at Fatal_Fortunes. See you next time. Thanks, guys.